evening and welcome to KTN Prime this Tuesday, the 4th of March. A significant day, of course, because this is the day a year ago that Kenyans went to the polls, and of course we'll be talking about that in this bulletin.
Thank you for joining us on KTN Prime. Now, a 3-day cabinet retreat began in Nanyuki this morning with President Uhuru Kenyatta reading the Riot Act to his cabinet and principal secretaries. Yes, the president called for what he termed as clarity, coherence and consistency in planning and implementation of government programs. KTN's Rita Tinina reports on the executive's first big review meeting since Jubilee took over power in the 2013 elections.
As the Uhuru Kenyatta administration prepares to mark 1 year in office, the president, his deputy, cabinet secretaries and principal secretaries converged at the Mount Kenya Safari Club in Nanyuki, Laikipia County, for a one-of-a-kind retreat. President Uhuru Kenyatta has on several occasions chaired cabinet meetings at State House, Nairobi. But the out-of-town working retreat is the first one under his presidency.
No individual successes. Only collective failures. If we succeed, it is the government and the people of Kenya who have succeeded. If we fail, it is the government and the people of Kenya who have failed.
And this is the year that we are going to make or break.
The executive arm of government will be under one roof for 3 days to review the government's performance and lay strategies for the implementation of future programs. And the president, who is presiding over the meeting, set the tone for the deliberations.
Each one of you will be presenting the priorities as they see them in their respective ministries. Not all of them will go through. And I want us to be very clear on that. Because we live in an environment of limited resources, and those are facts.
The president wants cabinet secretaries in the 18 ministries and principal secretaries in charge of the 26 departments in the ministries to be clear on the most pressing needs for the various ministries.
There will be no coming back to cabinet mid-year to say, oh, I need extra budgetary allocation for this and that. Because if you hadn't thought of it before, then it's not important.
He warned ministries against reliance on contingency funds.
We only have one contingency fund, and one contingency fund is not for ministries to come mid-year to say, well, it's a how. No, that is for emergencies that are unforeseen. And unforeseen is not part of your plan.
The retreat provides an opportunity for self-assessment for the executive arm of government, with the Jubilee manifesto as a scorecard.
We have rolled out the implementation of our new constitution. Every facet of that constitution is now up and running. We have rolled out devolution in a record 1 year.
Also on the agenda is the assessment of the progress made towards the attainment of Vision 2030, implementation of the Constitution, and how to manage the rising wage bill. The executive arm of government is also expected to reflect on its relations with other arms of government. Rita Tinina, KTN.
So 12 months on, what has the Jubilee government done? All through this week, we shall be taking stock of the Jubilee scorecard. That's what we're calling it, just what the Jubilee government has done in the various sectors.
That's right. Edith Kimani is here to give us a snapshot. What does the Jubilee scorecard look like at this moment?
Well, let's not waste any time. You know, I'm here to give you facts and figures. But before we get to the facts and figures, let's talk about what the Jubilee government promised. There were many promises, including a raft of things that were to be done in the first 100 days, but I don't think anything expresses it quite so clearly as a quote we're about to see by President Uhuru Kenyatta during one of his campaign days. And he said that the promise of the Jubilee government was to take measures to make Kenya a fairer, healthier, and better educated country. That's the vision for the Jubilee government. Whether or not it's achieving this is a question that you will have to answer at the end of this presentation. But what do Kenyans think? That's the promise. Let's look at the worry. Today, Ipsos Synovate released a poll which showed what Kenyans are most concerned about when it comes to the Jubilee government. High cost of living, 50% of the respondents saying that is what they're concerned about. Lack of employment, 19%. Corruption, crime and insecurity coming in third and fourth at 9% and 7% respectively. What we will notice, however, is that these two have to do with the same thing, the state of the economy. Kenyans are worried about whether they're making enough money, whether they're able to buy their food, educate their children, and so that's where we're going to start. The state of the economy as is right now. And what we're going to show you is a section of figures that best explain where Kenya is at right now. And I want you to think of this as your household. How you would do your budget at home, think of the national budget or the national figures as that. The wage bill, this is what we're spending to pay civil servants, to pay our members of parliament, to run government, 458 billion shillings. On its own, it looks like a figure that you would find in any national budget, except it's 53%. That's more than half of our national budget. And on top of this, we do have members of parliament as early as perhaps a few days ago saying that they want 5 billion more for car loans and mortgages. So that's where we're at in terms of paying bills. We haven't even done anything else. Our current debt. How much do we owe? 1.8 trillion shillings. And if you think this is any bad, Treasury is saying that by June of next year, that figure is going to have skyrocketed to 2.2 trillion shillings. And that is compared to a national budget, that's the current budget for the year ending June this year, which stands at 1.6 trillion shillings. Our GDP, this is basically how much the country is worth. Estimated at 3.4 trillion shillings. Now, these figures are from the Kenya Kenya Bureau of Statistics from 2012. We still don't have any updated figures. The growth rate, unfortunately, very sluggish economy, moving at only 5.2%. These are conservative estimates. We do have figures going as low as 4.7% and some as high as 5.8%. Our inflation rate, basically, in terms of shilling for product, how much are we spending? 6.86% inflation rate in the month of February. This is pretty good compared to January, where we had 7.2%. I just want us to go back to those figures so I can explain exactly what it means. Please take me back to the first board just so that I can explain what it means. It means that the country is worth 3.4 trillion shillings. We're growing very minimally at about 5.2%, and yet, going back to the first board, we are spending a whopping 1.6 trillion shillings a year, but we have a debt burden that surpasses this here, the debt burden surpassing our current budget. Obviously, these are figures that anyone would be worried about, and given that that figure is projected to go up by 2.2 trillion at the same exact time next year. So what does this mean for government a year on? So we continue to where we were. This means that government is trying everything in its power to bring these numbers down, to make sure that they make sense. And one of the things that Jubilee said when it came into power was that it was going to cut government spending. Some of the austerity measures that have been put in place restrict foreign travel. Cabinet secretaries and parastatal heads now have to justify foreign travel, also how much they need and how many days they need to go for. Thin the workforce. It says think workforce, but it really should be thin the workforce. What this means in reality is slash the number of jobs that are there in the civil service. It's not a popular thing, it's not a popular move, but it's something that the government says needs to be done. And part of this is because of the ghost workers that President Uhuru Kenyatta was talking about. The figure he gave recently was that the government was spending 150 million shillings to pay either dead workers, workers who are non-existent, retired workers, or workers who are simply been sacked. And that figure was coming to 1.8 million shillings. And so he's also collapsing parastatals to make sure that those whose work sort of overlap with each other come into one. This here is going to create a lot of controversy given that it's a catch-22. The Uhuru Ruto government did promise to create jobs. So while they're slashing jobs, to make sure that the numbers make sense, they also need to create them. Widen the tax bracket. I think we've all felt it. VAT the imposable 16% VAT on most products, which means that our rate of our cost of living is going up, and an insurance, which the government is basically doing, is basically taking an insurance policy from the IMF to make sure that we cushion ourselves from global economic shock. So that's what's happening in terms of the economy. In terms of security, which was the second thing that Kenyans said was a priority for them, here's a figure that you want to know. Kenya is ranked number 16 as one of the most, number 16th as the most dangerous country in the world. This is by Positive Press Agency. They say that our entanglement with Somalia, that coupled with the fact that we host the largest refugee camp in the world, creates for insecure places. Insecurity is particularly rife in Nairobi, Mombasa, and northeastern region. Just some particular examples coming in from Wajir, Garissa, and Mandera. Bungoma, you'll remember, just a few days after President Uhuru Kenyatta took office on 10th of March 2013, 10 people died from those attacks. Mandera, up to 15 people killed in inter-clan wars. Wajir and Garissa, who have experienced a raft of explosives and attacks even in police stations. And Nairobi, of course, will remember Westgate happening in September of 2013. These are the most affected regions when it comes to insecurity. What did government promise? President Uhuru Kenyatta said he was going to have CCTV technology employed across the country to ensure we were under surveillance. Government funded life insurance for military personnel and police officers to make sure that their households and their families were well taken care of even after they departed. New border security forces for our vast and porous borders. Remember who our neighbors are, Somalia and South Sudan, who unfortunately are also ranked as some of the most insecure countries in the world. Police-citizen ratio to be increased from 1 of every 1150 to 1 out of 800 citizens. This basically means that for every 1,150 people in Kenya, there is only one police officer. That ought to be changed to this figure. Recruit 15,000 police officers annually this year. We still haven't seen that. Provide modern security equipment. One of the major concerns was that there weren't enough vehicles, so they were to have 2 vehicles in every ward. That hasn't happened. Those are the issues internally. Externally, we have to see the map of Somalia to understand, first of all, how it affects us. I'm not sure if it's too clear on your screens, but basically what Kenya sought to do was get into Somalia from the south, move the Al-Shabaab all the way up, and make sure that they have reclaimed Kismayo, which is this point here, and ensure that they have taken away their charcoal industry, which was bringing them a lot of money, and they've managed to do that. So the areas which you're seeing in a pale sort of orange peach, those are the areas where government allied troops are, the Somali government allied troops, also in the auspices of AMISOM. The places that are in bright orange are the places where recent allied advances have taken place, and the places which are in orange, obviously a long way to go, still held by the Al-Shabaab. When it comes to these, what are some of the successes that Kenya has had? Well, to be honest, they're still standing. There are a lot of places where military action has been taken, and once the military has left, then the places fall back into the militants. That hasn't happened. Kismayo, for example, is doing quite well, and they have their own administration now, run by a Somali citizen. And as recently as, I think it was June of this year, they said that January this year, they said that 30 militants had been killed by KTN forces who were doing an aerial bombardment. So there are the achievements. We have the failures as well. So you decide how far the government has gone in terms of the things that you find most critical.
Well, thank you, Edith. That was a really comprehensive look. And just looking at what you've told us, do you think that Deputy President's assessment of the situation as so far so good actually mirrors what you've just told us?
Well, it depends who's looking at it, because like we saw yesterday, there are always good numbers and there are always negative numbers. If you look at what we were talking about insecurity, they might give you figures of what we call Operation Nyumba Kumi. That's taking place, but does it have structures? And are they outside of Nairobi? Depends what side of the mirror you're looking at.
A very political answer.
Very political answer.
Thank you, Edith. We are all through this week, we are keeping an eye on those pledges versus what the Jubilee government has been able to deliver. And that brings us to a big question tonight. We are asking you, do you think the Jubilee government is delivering on its election pledges?
That's right. Join that conversation. Let us know what you think. You can text us on 22155. Begin with a yes or no, and do leave your comment after that, or you can tweet us. My handle is @Kachungira. You can also tweet Ben. His is @Ben_Kitili, and do add @KTN Kenya to that. We'll be looking at the poll results at the end of this bulletin, and we will also, of course, read some of your comments.
No. Is it too early to talk about the 2017 general election? Well, as Kenyans mark the first year since the 2013 general election, it is argued that time is ripe for a proper review of that poll.
There are no words that would have adequately described the tension that had gripped Kenya at this specific moment exactly 1 year ago. All polling stations countrywide were closed and the results were streaming in. None of the top presidential candidates had reached the 50% plus one vote threshold. Anxiety was building up. Today, civil society and election observation groups say it's high time Kenyans reviewed last year's electoral processes.
In other jurisdictions, elections are a way of life. You take them in your stride. So it's very frustrating when we have all this information. We know what's supposed to be done. We've made the recommendation, and the country has just kept quiet or shut up on issues of elections.
We accepted and moved on. The question that has got to be asked now is, how long will we accept and move on?
The reality, these groups say, is specifically harsh on the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission and political parties.
People in this country are not foolish. They have tolerated results that are not necessarily convincing. The question has got to be, will this be tolerated again in 2017?
ABC, you remember you had talk about we should disband it or not. I think these issues will have been settled through the evaluation.
When we are talking about political will, is it limited to these 349 individuals, or as we have come to define them, the 2 or 3 horses that are participating in the race? What is the function of these other 14 million people?
While the judiciary has been lauded for expediting the numerous electoral petitions, the Supreme Court ruling on the presidential appeal did not receive as much accolade.
Was it fair or just to handle it within 14 days and actually excluding evidence when getting the information itself was a challenge? What happens if we will be faced by a similar situation in the next elections?
The IEBC has itself recommended that voting in the next general election be spread over 2 days as opposed to just a single day. Whether this proposal is the answer to the many questions posed over Kenya's electoral processes remains to be seen. Asham Wilu, KTN, Nairobi.
So exactly 12 months ago, I was in Gatundu preparing for the tallying of votes after the March 4th general election. Let's now bring in a man who was arguably the busiest in this country at that particular time. That is Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission Chairman Ahmed Isaac Hassan. Karibu, Bwana Chairman.
Thank you.
Now, 12 months on, you've had a number of by-elections. Yeah. What can you say are the lessons from that? There has also been an election petition, presidential election petition. What would you say are the lessons from that election?
I think the Commission has learned, as I said, very important lessons after the elections. We've been able to rectify some of the mistakes that were made during the elections. And if you watch the by-elections, we're able to train and deploy all the technology that we had, both the electronic voter identification and the result transmission. They all worked 100%. And you saw elections in real time, the results being announced in real time, and the winners and the losers accepting defeat. So I think we had time to prepare, we had time to train, we had time to deploy. We didn't have that time on 4th of March. Secondly, I think we have also learned a very important lesson in terms of having to test technology before you deploy in a general election. some of the technologies were new, they required to be tested. And that was not done properly because of the time constraints. Thirdly, I think the issue of communicating with the key stakeholders, especially the presidential candidates, about the mode of tallying results in the bombers, I think brought confusion. They didn't understand that we were doing our job. Some of them thought that they had to be there and do the work of the commission and tally before they could give permission. And so I think in future we need to develop a very clear code of conduct and set of regulations which are published in advance on how election tallying and result transmission and announcement will be made, especially for presidential elections. Because in other elections like governors, senators, is announced at the counties.
Yeah.
It's only presidential elections that is announced at the Nairobi.
Is there anything that you would say the Electoral Commission in Kenya, IEBC, needs to do to ensure that in 2017 there is no presidential election petition, come what may?
You know, the law allows for any candidate who takes part in the election petition, in election, to file for a petition. But actually, we hoped that if all the technology had worked very well, and I know for a fact myself, if the result transmission had worked 100%, the Prime Minister will have considered defeat. Yes. I know for that for a fact because I spoke to him several times, and I knew he was going to concede defeat. But then there were doubts created because of the failure of the result transmission. So, to come back to your question, it is to make sure that technologies which we deploy are foolproof and there's fallback position, and that people have now full trust and faith in the technology, and that people are able to see the results in good time, in real time, before we can give the official results later. And that will give them people time to concede defeat, and now the country can move forward.
You have talked about holding the elections separately at the county level and the national level. What value would that add to our elections?
If you look at our neighboring countries, Tanzania, Uganda, all African countries, no country in Africa, apart from Kenya and Sudan, hold elections, 6 or 9 elections on the same day. And so what we are saying is that it may not be sustainable on both the staff and the commission and the country to have all elections on the same day. Some of them are very high stakes. Some of them are required to be done different times. Uganda, Tanzania, they hold their election for president 2 years before the parliament and then local government. Yeah. They stagger the elections. What we are saying is that from our experience as having managed the 4th of March elections, and even as voters, you could see the long lines. If there's an 80% turnout, we are going to have the same challenges again. So it's time for us to think and have a serious debate whether we can again have the 6 elections, or we can have national elections and county elections, presidential, parliamentary. I mean, there are many ways of staggering elections.
Yes, Chairman.
And also we want to allow people to vote early. Yeah. The election officials, security personnel, so they can vote early and now do their work.
Final question, Bona Chairman. CORD coalition, the minority coalition in Parliament, have said severally that IEBC needs to be disbanded and another electoral commission formed before 2017. What would you say to that? And what is your reaction to the ODM election that was held last Friday?
Well,
supposed to be held, yeah.
To answer the first question, I think it's quite unfortunate that when you have an election, there are winners and losers. And they lost the election, especially for president. By the way, they are not complaining about governor's election or senate election or members of parliament. The only complaint is about presidential elections. And so we are saying that they had gone to court, the Supreme Court overruled them, and I think they accepted the results. And I think it's not a good time or a good thing for a nation to be disbanding its electoral commissions every 5 years. You need to allow institutions to mature, to grow, to learn from their mistakes and project forward. Like now we are doing post-election evaluation, not just to look back, but also to prepare how we can do a better job in 2017. So I want to appeal to the core leadership to come down on their rhetoric and allow and support the commission to do a better job. If they have got any criticism that they have, any complaints, we are willing to listen, sit down with them and hear them out. But I think it's not fair to keep on hammering this point that we're going to disband the commission, because it actually demoralizes the staff, and people are actually now leaving the commission.
Yes.
And the last question was ODM.
Yeah.
The commission can conduct elections for anybody who requests the commission. We did election for the judicial, for the Law Society of Kenya, when we were electing the officials. We do election for the Kenya Red Cross Society, for schools, for institutions like the JSC. So a political party can request the commission to conduct elections or to provide technical support. Unfortunately, ODM never asked us to help them. Of course, if you're asking for our disbandment, you can't ask for our help to do your elections. I suppose they didn't want to do that. But still, we are willing to support them and give them technical support and give them all the resources of the commission to help them conduct a credible and free and fair elections.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Chairman of the Independent Election and Boundaries Commission, Ahmed Isakas, and always a pleasure talking to him. Now, away from matters Jubilee, and 1 year after the elections, it was a day filled with joy and laughter, and for good reason too. At least for the students of Moi High School, Kabarak in Nakuru County. The school clinched the second position nationally in the KCSE results released yesterday. KTN's Rachel Menza explains why the school has maintained its exemplary performance over the years.
Celebrations for emerging number 2 in the country. It was a day filled with pomp and color as the students celebrated the success of their brothers and sisters. Celebrations that for quite some time the school has enjoyed as they keep emerging in the top 10 list nationally, and they say they had expected this year's success. Moi High School Kabarak Chief Principal Henry Kiplagat attributes their success to the fact that the school is founded on Christian principles with moral excellence.
You know, we are running the school as a family. We are using the family model to run the school. By God's grace, Moi High School Kabarak is the only co-educational school that is featuring among the top 10.
He also attributed their success to the support they get from the Board of Trustees and the Board of Governors, which is chaired by the retired President Daniel Arap Moi, who is also passionate about education. The principal says that they always carry out academic needs assessment, which enables the teacher to establish the weaker points of the students and rectify them.
You know, in our school, we have minimum expectations of a teacher. And one of the minimum expectations that must be met by a teacher is punctuality. For example, you see, if I go to class as a teacher 10 minutes late, and my student comes to class 10 minutes late, none of us is better than the other.
The school, however, does not believe that they have a monopoly of ideas, hence do benchmarking of schools that they have done better than them. As a school routine, they can even send students to another schools for study skills on how to pass a certain subject. But Kabarak High School is also leading example to other schools.
We look at the subjects and how we've fared nationally, and then we now pick on the schools we need to benchmark. And sometimes you can even choose to benchmark even a school routine, or we decide to benchmark, say, business studies or chemistry or biology. And we sometimes involve the students to go to those schools and experience the programs that are ongoing. And they can spend maybe 2 days in a school.
And as a mixed boarding school, they manage it by living in a family model where the students live like brothers and sisters in a family setting. Kamche Menza, KTN, from Nakuru County.
Well, it was with many reservations that many Kenyans received the news that national schools had been increased. However, the new national schools are now having the last laugh. Some of these schools have actually edged out the traditional KCSE giants to clinch top positions in the results that were released yesterday. Well, if you're wondering why, KTN's Najma Ismail tells us.
This is little-known Kapsabet Boys High School in Nandi County. Even though it is a newcomer in the national schools category, the school managed to become number 4 countrywide. Chavakali High School in Vihiga County also made a name for itself after it emerged number 8. And to sum up the top 10 categories, Mary Hill Girls High School in Kiambu County managed to become number 9 countrywide. The previous giants were beaten by the newcomers, with schools like Starehe Boys emerging 17th countrywide, while Alliance Girls and Mangu High came 25th and 26th respectively. Lenana shocked many by emerging 42nd countrywide. The new schools joined the national category amid criticism, resistance and outright politics on why they did not deserve to be in that category. Few expected them to do so well.
We are celebrating cognitive education. The students we are carrying shoulder high are those that are cognitively superior or are intellectually gifted. But then we ought to recognize that Kenya requires also all the other many gifts.
Educationist John Mugu attributes this sterling performance by the new national schools to competition. He also cited schools that were little known in the past, like Maranda, coming out from nowhere and making a name for themselves as motivation to the little known schools.
Competition was never as stiff as it is now. But also I think the field has never been as fairer as we're experiencing now. Because when you distribute resources that are going to only a few schools, to 78 schools, and even we are looking forward to more, then it means that more students can benefit.
The old KCSE giants have found themselves under unexpected pressure from the newcomers.
When there are changes and the transitional turbulence or dynamics that come about, there are many people who may be affected in different ways.
This turn of events is also expected to trigger very stiff competition in this year's KCSE in the race to the top 10 list. Najma Ismail, KTN.
The older national schools getting around for their money, including my former school, Lenana School. They need to up their game. Now, it appears harsh conditions in prison did not deter inmates from the Naivasha GK prison from achieving their dreams. One of them is among the top performers in the country after scoring a mean grade of A- in the KCSE results released yesterday.
As best performing schools and students in the just released KCSE results continue to celebrate, inmates at the Naivasha GK prisons were also celebrating the success of their fellow prisoners. Samuel Kamwara, serving a jail term of 10 years, was the reason for the celebrations. Kamwara has scored an A-. This was Kamwara's dream. He sat the exam for a second time after he scored a B plane in 2011. He wanted a better grade.
My life aspirations of which I need to accomplish in life, I would like to pursue Bachelor of Education so that I can try to enlighten my fellow colleagues outside there.
2 other inmates at the penal institution were also celebrated. Justice Chalo, who was released just 3 months after a successful appeal, scored a B-, and Isaac Baraza scored a C+.
I was in prison, but I was determined to score. I scored. I can't say that I didn't score because what I did was my best. And I know that grade, a C+, will help me push my career, which is to pursue a degree.
The prison authorities say they will be writing to the courts to seek probation for all those who have performed well.
Conditions ile wanasoma nazo kwa kweli ni zile za kujisacrifice na ni mzuri. So we are hoping to do even much better than this in the future.
This is the 3rd time the penal institution has produced an A student in the KCSE. Angel Katusia, KTN.
After numerous stories of women having to give sexual favors to get fish from fishermen, a new intervention has been mooted. A group of 19 women fish traders based in Kisumu have adopted an innovative system that could see them own their own fishing units. The campaign is called No Sex for Fish. Fred Omulo has the rest of that story.
The scourge of the fishing trade has for a long time been the business arrangement in which fishermen engage primarily in fetching the product while women engage in trade at the retail level. This leaves them at the mercy of unscrupulous fishermen who often demand sexual favors before selling their product. The No Sex for Fish campaign aims at overturning this arrangement by enabling women to own their boats, something rare in most beaches here.
Getting fish
enough for your business is very difficult. So when you go to a man, you have to get Jaboya, and it was real. But right now, with the boats we have had now, when they come, she will come in my boat. There is no way we'll talk about sex.
To build a boat costs $1,400 US, which I believe is about 102,000 shillings. So it's not really a lot of money when you know that it's going to support 3 women. Each boat will support 3 women. And that is where we are heading now.
4 years ago, fish traders at Ogenya and Nyamori beaches in Nyando came together under the assistance of the US Peace Corps and decided to buy their own boats and fishing gear, ultimately becoming the employers of the fishermen. The success of their cooperative has seen them amass 10 boats, prompting the American government to chip in 3 more this year.
And we are just so pleased that we could help a group of ladies take control of their lives, be breadwinners for their families, understand the importance of health and independence and autonomy.
We are most likely going to stop new infections, because when you empower the woman so that they don't become vulnerable to the men that most likely are infected, then of course you reduce chances of infection.
Each boat supports 3 women and can bring in as much as 10,000 shillings in profits every day, uplifting numerous communities around the lake. The success of the initiative has attracted funding from the US government and other interested organizations, with plans to expand it into other counties that bear the brunt of sexually transmitted diseases. From Kisumu County, I am Fredo Mulo.
Time now to get down to business, and we begin with a development on a story that we brought you yesterday. Controversy has now hit the planned sale of Kenya's 4th mobile operator, U-Mobile. Employees of the operator are now demanding 1.2 billion shillings and a separation before the deal is closed. Michael Karanja has those details.
News of the sale of U-Mobile over the weekend has rattled its employees as reality finally hits home. The over 200 staff are accusing the management of not engaging them on issues key to their future. Specifically, the staff say their severance package is in doubt. In an email correspondence between the employees and the management team, the U staff have resolved that there need to be a separation between them and ESA Telecom Kenya in a bid to safeguard their benefits should the sale go through.
In total, we were asking for 1.2 billion as employee compensation, and this is the figure we have registered even in court, and this is the figure we are expecting from management to pay employees as settlement due.
However, KTN has also learned that U-Mobile, through its lawyers, have put a proposal on the table for its staff. The operator has proposed that employees be paid a minimum of 2 months notice pay, severance pay at 15 days for every year completed of service, as well as a bonus of 2 months' pay to those not absorbed by any of the potential investors. However, the employees' apprehension stems from the genuine fear that if their dues are not settled before the sale is complete, their new employers might fail to honor the deal.
We are worried that once they seal this deal, they might go away to India and we'll have no way of reaching them, and we have no way of getting our dues, knowing that maybe some of these interested suitors, interested investors, some of them could be also of Indian origin. So we are worried that the transaction might be completed in India with total disregard of employees here in Kenya.
U-Mobile, which is owned by Indian conglomerate ESA, is selling its business to the 2 leading operators, Airtel Kenya and Safaricom, at a reported 8.6 billion shillings. U-Mobile's management, however, dispute the figure. Safaricom is expected to acquire U-Mobile's infrastructure, while Airtel Kenya will acquire U's 2.7 million subscribers. In a clear indication that it was keen on closing the deal, Safaricom has already notified its shareholders of the impending buyout in a letter to the Nairobi Securities Exchange. Michael Karanja, KTN Business.
Now, if you've always wanted to fly around Kenya but always thought it was too expensive, this may be fantastic news for you. Jambo Jet is jetting in. In fact, 8,000 people seem to think it's fantastic news. They've already booked their places to fly the low-cost carrier Jambo Jet when it takes to the skies on the 1st of April this year. Speaking to KTN Business, Managing Director Willem Hondiu said the airline is largely targeting those who've actually never flown as its key customers. Joseph Bonyo reports.
Even before it announced the official date of its inaugural flight, Jambo Jet, the low-cost carrier subsidiary of Kenya Airways, had generated enough debate. It is this debate, mostly on social media, that the airline is riding on to grow its market, 40% of which it says are people who have never flown in their life.
We are looking for new passengers. We expect that at least 30 to 40% of the passengers will have never flown before. They will move from ground transport to flying.
Already, the airline is modifying 2 Boeing 737 aircrafts ahead of its April 1st launch date. The carrier will fly twice to Kisumu and 5 times to Mombasa on a daily basis, as well as 10 times every week to Eldoret. But of significance has been the airline's low airfares that had been initially treated with a lot of skepticism.
Why should somebody who wants to travel without luggage pay for people who want to travel with luggage? So if you really want to travel cheap, take your hand luggage, that's for free, and travel. Don't touch anything else. Then you are really cheap, 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 cheap. The moment you say, I want to take luggage, that's fine, but then you have to pay a bit.
With its model, Jambo Jet will be taking competition directly to the doorsteps of other market players, notably Fly 540. Riding on the Kenya Airways brand, the airline notes that within another year it will be ready to take on other regional carriers.
The first 8 to 12 months we will operate domestically because you start an airline and then you should not grow too fast. Learn the game, learn the market, learn the lessons, adjust there where need be, and then you have, when you feel, I feel comfortable and I've stabilized everything, then you can make the next step.
In Africa, low-cost carriers have in the past had very short shelf life. However, for Jambo Jet, they are optimistic of replicating the success of globally renowned segment players like Southwest in America and EasyJet in Europe. Joseph Bono, KTN Business.
Yes, the launch is on the 1st of April, but it is not an April Fool's prank. You will be able to fly for less than 3,000 shillings. Moving on, shareholders of Diamond Trust Bank have given the lender a go-ahead on the intention to float 22 million shares in a rights issue, subject to approval by the Capital Markets Authority. The bank, which did not specify the amount it targets to raise in the issue, said that the additional capital will fund expansion into new markets and enhance growth in the existing markets. The lender has also reported a 20% growth pre-tax profits to 7.2 billion shillings for the year ended December 2013. Now, in the same period, the loan book grew significantly by 27% to 111 billion shillings on the back of SME lending. The bank seeks to leverage on card business, online and mobile payments for future growth. Shareholders have also welcomed the bank's move to increase the share capital from 1 billion to 2 billion by creation of 50 million ordinary shares.
And I think the SMEs are also many in those small cities and the areas, and they're able to now get funding and access to the bank.
So we are really currently in the middle of strengthening our mobile banking platform, our internet banking platform, our agent banking platform, so that we are in a position to take advantage of the needs of the peoples of this country. So this is product development, innovation is one very large area, or an area which is receiving significant attention from us.
Kenya will field the same team for the Commonwealth Games and the Africa Championships. The Commonwealth Games are scheduled for July in Glasgow, while the Africa Championships will be hosted by Morocco. AK says that only athletes who are ready to comply with the set rule should line up at the national trials on the 6th and 7th of June.
Kenyan athletes will not have the leeway to choose whether to represent the country at the Africa Championships in Morocco or at the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow. This is after Athletics Kenya announced plans to have just one team representing Kenya in both events. The last time Kenya had to take part in two competitions staged around the same time was in 2011, when a team for the Daegu World Championships and the All-African Games was selected during one trial.
I would want people to think that we are not taking African Championships seriously. And you all know that it is from the African Championships that we are going to select the teams that will represent Africa during the Continental Cup in September.
The move to have one team for the two events that are just 10 days apart has, however, raised concerns, with many arguing that it will deny many athletes an opportunity to don the national colors, while some athletes may want to just take part in one of the events.
National Federation has selected you to do a duty for the country. You cannot just say you don't want it without any good reason, because we have some disciplinary measures that can be taken.
The move may have been triggered by the fact that many established athletes from the country have previously snubbed the African Championships.
Hiyo timu ni lazima ya timu ambaye inaweza kwenda kutushindia medali. Na wale ambao wataenda katika African Championships. African Championships si mchezo pia ya kusema kwamba pengine hii mchezo si muhimu sana.
The national trials have been brought forward from the 27th and 28th of June to 6th and 7th of June so as to beat the Commonwealth Games entry by name deadline. Meanwhile, no new road races will be included in the AK calendar of events until new rules governing road running in the country have been released by a panel of experts.
And any official from the region who offers himself to organize an event that has not been sanctioned, then he stands banned himself and suspended from activities forever.
Athletics Kenya has for the longest time cried foul over individuals taking advantage of athletes to take part in races that do not meet the set prize money range. Lynn Washira, KTN Sports.
The curtain-raising tournament of the 4th Barclays Bank of Kenya Open, the prom tournament, starts tomorrow at the Karen Country Club. The organizers were busy putting final touches on the ground for the amateurs to have a test of the skills alongside the pros. The main Kenya Open event tees off on 6th. Stephanie Anderson, last year's winner from Spain, and Jordi Garcia Pinto are some of the professional golfers set to challenge for top honors. The Premier Golf Tournament is one of the European Tour events and has attracted participants from over 20 countries here in the country.
Well, as we close our bulletin tonight, let's go back to our big question. We did ask you whether you think that the Jubilee government is delivering on its election pledges.
This is the poll results, and 55% of you say no, and only 45% say yes. Yatish Zef says no, Jubilee government has just launched projects, but not much impact on Wanjiku. Its manifesto is still on paper.
Well, Patrick Kibe is on the completely other side of the court. He says for sure Jubilee government has done a good job. After 5 years, Kenya will be marvelous.
Kosinati Budanlezi says, I never voted for Jubilee, but I think they've done their best under the circumstances. Major failure has been on the laptops project.
And finally, Yatich Zef says, no, the Jubilee government has just launched project, but not much impact on Wanjiku. The manifesto is still on paper.
Thank you for participating on the big question tonight and for joining us on your most qualified news bulletin in town. I'm Ben Kitili. Have a wonderful night.
I'm Nancy Kachingira. Our sign language interpreter this evening was William Silla. It was great to have your company. See you again tomorrow. Good night.